So of course I gave my answer, but I wanted to back myself up. Who does exorcisms in the church?
Okay, dioceses have exorcisms. However, he can only exercise his exorcisms with my permission. And so I've got a couple of guys that have got some training in that area. And so if somebody seems to be manifesting some, issues, I'll send them to that priest, and the priest will first of all have them do a psychological thing to make sure it's not a psychological illness. Tell the person, well, what in your life is not the way it ought to be. If you're living in a objectively sinful situation, well, no wonder things are not going well for you. So basically do an assessment of whether this is someone that's an actual candidate for an exorcism or not. And then if he thinks, well, maybe that would help, then he contacts me and describes the situation, and I decide whether he should proceed with an exorcism, attempted exorcism or not. And it's something that is very uncommon, but nevertheless we have a provision for it. I do remember, many troubles where people think, oh, we need an exorcism on that. We don't. An exorcism is when the exorcist directly addresses Satan and says, Satan, be gone. He's speaking directly to Satan. Okay? Deliverance is when the priest is asking the Lord to intervene to set this person free. Okay? And any of us can say prayers of deliverance. Okay? When we do the Lord's Prayer, what's the last line in the Lord's Prayer? Deliverance from evil. Okay? So whenever somebody's in a situation and they seem to be very stirred up, and they think, God, there's an evil presence in our midst, you don't have to go to the exorcist for that. You can bring it down and say the Lord's Prayer. Say it over and over again if you want. Deliver us from evil. Because it's the Lord that does it anyway. And so you're asking the Lord. So that's exorcism. Okay, but I can tell you one time I had a phone call that, we get these odd phone calls. I had a phone call back in Oklahoma, and somebody said that they had bought a rocking chair. And the rocking chair has got them spooked because they got it at a garage sale. And it just started rocking. And they're so spooked. They talked to their minister about it, and the minister said, well, you need to talk to a priest that do that. And so they called me, and they said, we got this rocking chair, and it's driving us nuts, what should you do? I said, well, get rid of the rocking chair. That's all the problem. Yes?
As far as the structure and stuff of the church, was it all created for convenience sake, or did Jesus have is there a reason why we have a pope and the apostles and all that, and why that is the way it is? Or was it all convenience, or
It evolved. It evolved from Jesus, what Jesus said to do, and then in response to changing circumstances. Excuse me. And so it's clear that Jesus set aside the apostles for specific ministry. It's clear that he designated Peter to be the first of them. And then how that gets exercised evolves over time. And when Gentiles started flooding into the church and not everybody was Jewish anymore, Gentiles brought their own way of doing things a lot of times. And of course, eventually, the civil government, Roman civil government was organized into dioceses for civil, like we say, counties. They would say, so the church, it's kind of like here in Arkansas, a lot of times our parish boundaries are county boundaries. It's the only church in the county. And so we've adopted the Arkansas counties as our, for our boundaries. Well, dioceses emerged that way too. So all of this kind of evolved in time. But just like you plant a seed and the plant begins to grow and it begins to flower, it's still the same plant, even though it's grown and developed. Okay, but it's in continuity with from the beginning, and that's what happened in the life of the church.
So,
One thing you may notice, by the way, speaking about continuity, is when a church breaks away from the Catholic Church, it is always because a group of people no longer believes what the mainstream was believing. Okay? It's always, they always believe fewer things than the church that they broke away from. Okay? The only exceptions might be the Mormons, you know, who added some things and went their own way. But I always find that very striking. You know, with the continuity from the very beginning, we can claim that, okay? And it's unbroken. And that all the other churches, and if you look at, you know, some of them have broken away from other churches, they've broken away, and each time they drop one thing or another. And so that's just, I thought that's rather out there. Yes?
So I want to go back on your thing of deliverance. So you said it's okay to say prayers of deliverance?
That's right.
So, not using that word mom, but can I do that over my kid?
Yeah, well, it'd be good to do that.
Okay.
Say the Lord's Prayer for them.
Well, I know one time you touched their head and I was like, oh, you held her for 24 hours. And then like, you're like,
Yeah. Okay. Any other, yes?
So, when Jesus named the 12 apostles, are those the only 12 apostles? Because I know that there are some Protestant churches or some other churches that have like, oh, this person's an apostle, or they have like a group called apostles. Why? Are there more than just the 12 apostles, or is that just like an arbitrary name? Or?
Well, in the early church, apostle means those who are sent forth by Christ, right? But now it's not just the 12. St. Paul understood himself to be an apostle, describes himself as an apostle. So it's not as cut and dried as all that. In fact, we talk about Mary Magdalene as being the apostle to the apostles, apostolora, because she's the one who brought the news of the resurrected Jesus to the other apostles. And so there's that. But these other churches that refer to people as being apostles, they're probably referring to their belief that their faith is the faith of the apostles, rather than any kind of apostolic succession where bishop was ordained by bishop. Because the only churches that have maintained that is the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church. The Anglican Church claims it, but in fact there's some breaks in its sequence. Yes.
Okay, we're having a little discussion, sorry.
Okay.
What, I thought there was the 12 disciples, where did the 12 apostles? I mean, the 12 apostles.
The 12 apostles,
Are they
There's
the
a bunch of
12 disciples?
there's more than 12 disciples.
I'm so confused.
You know, like the 72 that get sent out on mission, those would be disciples. Disciple simply means a student. Students of Jesus. Like our English word discipline, you know, it's to teach you things, or the academic disciplines, or courses of study, you know. So the disciples are students, and the apostles became apostles once they were sent out.
One of the things that we've been doing, Bishop, is in our classes of like talking about some of the saints and introducing the people to saints. Since we have you here, and I know about your work with working for the canonization process of Stanley Rothman, and I think that many of us know about it, and we have some cards here, but if you wouldn't mind, just, I know you did part of the interviewing people, and you've gone over to Guatemala quite a few times. Just a few minutes, could you just share us a little bit about, I know you can do a whole presentation.
Yeah.
We'll have to get you come back and do that, but he's declared blessed right now. We have a church, just say a few words about it.
Sure. About the process or about
Just introducing, I guess, the people who has never heard of Blessed Stanley Rothman. So we have a few there.
Okay. Blessed Stanley Rother was a priest of the Diocese of Oklahoma City and Tulsa before it was split into two dioceses. And that was my home diocese. The church in Oklahoma had a mission in Guatemala from 1963. He was sent there in 1968. The Civil War came to his area in 1980, and he was martyred there in 1981. When the military came in and started arresting people and killing people, he was told that his name was on a death list, and he should flee, and he did. But then he said, you know what? shepherd cannot flee when the wolf comes. And so he returned and continued to serve his people there until he was killed in the rectory by intruders, in agents of the government in 1981. Short version.
That's true. And also, you knew him.
I met him one time. He came back to Oklahoma for the ordination of the priesthood of his cousin, Father Don Wolf, and I was there for that. I greeted him. He had, he was not a talkative person anyway. Looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, because he had, over the course of time, he had 16 of his catechists were killed, about 300 of his parishioners. Of course, a lot of that was after he had died. But there was a massacre of like 16 people, and it was mistaken. The government, the soldiers got spooked and killed a bunch of people. The families were too afraid to claim the bodies of their loved ones, and so he claimed the bodies and buried them from the church, and that was viewed as being sympathizing with the enemy. And so there was a number of things he did just to be a good shepherd to his people at the time. And but he was from Okarche, Oklahoma, farm boy, and was a very faithful servant.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop. I know it touches me to know that I got to shake Mother Teresa's hand when she came to Arkansas. We were seminarians. Twice I got to meet Pope John Paul II, and to know that they're saints. It blesses my life. A better connection to the communion of saints. To know we have a bishop was helping the part of the canonization process of this wonderful priest in Oklahoma blesses me as well, and I know how dear he is to you and to many people. And we have a church named for him up in Decatur, which is awesome, and that's neat. But Larry, I know, always does a wonderful job of introducing us to some saints, and so I'm going to let Larry finish it off and give a final prayer. Thank you, Larry.
We have time.
Strict order. I was going to ask you if you had a bunch of bad letters sent to the Archdiocese, but we won't go there.
On you?
On you. Probably.
Larry Weatherspoon.
Okay, tonight, this is going to be, I think that these two saints, I'm going to do two saints tonight because I found out some stuff this week that I had no idea. So my first saint is Saint Anthony of Egypt, also known as Saint Anthony the Abbot, also known as Saint Anthony the Great. He was the founder of Christian monasticism with a radical approach to discipleship, and became known as the spiritual father of the monastic communities that exist throughout the church to this day. He responded to many requests, and so he founded a sort of monastery of scattered cells. But he was like St. Francis of Assisi. He had a great fear of stately buildings and well-laden tables. He was born into a very wealthy family, but when both of his parents died around the year 270, he inherited this great amount of wealth that he called a great burden. Okay. This prompted him to reevaluate his life, the redemptive possibilities of the personal loss of his parents, and the spiritual danger of his financial gains. While attending church one day, he heard as if for the first time, "If you wish to be perfect, go, sell your possessions, give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." He felt that Jesus had spoken these words directly to him, and he duly followed the advices, sold everything, taking care of his sister first, but then she later joined a group of consecrated virgins. In 311, he hoped to become a martyr during the renewed Roman persecution, fearlessly exposing himself to the danger while giving moral and material support to those in prison. And then 28 years later, he was fighting the Arian heresy. St. Anthony, however, sought a more comprehensive version a vision of self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence. He found this among the hermits of the Egyptian desert. He died at the age of 105. His hermit life reminds us of the absoluteness of our break with sin and total commitment to Christ. Now I've got another saint, because I found out this week that apparently we can have a backup saint, which I heard from your office. Saint Basil the Great. Saint Basil was on his way to becoming a famous teacher when he decided to begin a religious life of gospel poverty. He founded what is probably the first monastery in Asia Minor. He is to monks of the East what Saint Benedict is to the monks of the West. After founding several more monasteries, he was ordained, and in 370 made bishop. I'm going to probably say this wrong. Caesarea, now southeastern Turkey. He continued to study and was known as a man of vast learning, genuine elegance, and immense charity. This earned him the title of Great during his life and Doctor of the Church. He was responsible